Welcome to ChatIR. I'm Yvette Locker, President and CEO of CRE, and we have Michael Becker with us today, who is the Senior Vice President of Financial Product Strategy at Business Wire. Today we'll be talking about a survey that Business Wire conducted on technology used in investor relations. So welcome, Michael.
Hi, Yvette. Hi, Siri. Thanks for having me today.
Our pleasure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the survey that you conducted?
Sure. In late 2014, Business Wire conducted a survey in conjunction with Siri looking at Canadian IRO engagement around emerging and traditional IR outreach. Specifically, we wanted to gauge where is the Canadian IR community as it relates to social media use. And the findings were pretty much consistent with what we expected to see. And then we look forward to doing this survey annually to see how it changes, and we believe it will change.
Oh, that's great. So for the IROs that are actually using the social media to monitor what's happening with their companies, what are they finding? What type of information are they looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me step back a little bit. What we're seeing is that 77% of IROs, generally speaking, are not using social media today. And that's consistent with what we're seeing across the board, not just in Canada, but worldwide in other developed markets like the United States and some European markets. So what are the other IROs looking at? The 23% of IROs that are using social media, they're looking at media commentary, analyst commentary, company rumors, activist comments. So things that are going on about their company, and they're proactively listening.
Okay, so for the ones that are proactively listening, what could they be doing better to improve their monitoring?
So a few things. So let me take a little step back and say that one way to improve your monitoring is to not just listen, but to augment by distributing your information through social media channels, right? So you're priming the pump by getting information out there in social media channels so that there's much more out there that you can be listening to and people can be commenting on. That's part one of it. Part two, then, in terms of those that are monitoring, we're finding a few things. One is that they're monitoring the wrong things.
Okay.
Right. So based on, I think one of the most interesting things in this survey that we found was 78% of respondents are monitoring stock price, when only 11% are monitoring social media by hashtag, which is your ticker symbol with a dollar sign in front of it.
Right.
Right. So there's this disconnect of looking at using social media, but maybe looking at the wrong things. So that's something that's an easy fix of, instead of looking at things like stock price, put a dollar sign in front of your stock symbol and Google search it. I mean, that's the lay way to kind of get going.
Right. Great tips. So for the issuers that aren't monitoring social media, and it was a significant percentage,
yeah,
why aren't they doing that?
Well, we think there's a huge misconception around social media monitoring. And the biggest misconceptions around this is A, it's too expensive, and B, it's too time consuming. This may have been true years ago, but the reality is today, it's not the case. In fact, more than 55% of the respondents said they would implement monitoring if it was easier and less expensive, when the truth is, it is easy and it's not that expensive. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
It's also very interesting for us to see how many IROs do not think it's meaningful to monitor online discussions. So we looked at, the amount of discussions that are going on, and they vary by company, by size, by sector. And, so the mega cap Canadian companies, the household brand names that we know, are more likely to be looking at social media, monitoring, listening. On the other hand, the smaller companies are not. And we would argue that there's chatter about all companies worldwide. So it's important that all companies worldwide, in this case Canadian companies, are doing kind of a basic search out there of what's going on and listening to the environment.
Okay. So you spoke a little bit about the reasons why they don't monitor, because it's time consuming, it's more expensive. So can you talk a little bit about the tools that are available to issuers to monitor social media that might address those two concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a suite of free tools out there, paid, fee-based, and free tools out there that make this really easy. Like I just said, a Google alert is one of the easiest ways to get going, right?
Right.
You set up, your ticker symbol with a dollar sign in a Google alert, or your company in a Google alert, just to get going, right? So IROs in reality should evaluate not just these free options, but a range of services. Some of these platforms may require a fee, and they can save you some time and energy. They're 24/7. And when we look at what they are, so for example, on a pay level, there's a tool called Nuvi, Nuvi, that does very good visualization and social media monitoring. And then I would say for most of our members and colleagues, I'd be looking at getting going in free tools, right? So Twitter and Twitter search, looking at stock twits, right? Looking at Seeking Alpha, looking at Facebook, and going on from there. The other side of this is that a large part of this conversation is around monitoring and listening, but the other part of this conversation should also be about connecting and engagement, right? That's another part here is you're listening. Right. What happens if you hear something? Right. And to not just sit and idly listen, but to also be able to properly engage. I think that's the next level of sophistication. I think we'll start to see a lot of that in the Canadian market of really meaningful connection and meaningful engagement. And I would go one step further for IROs to really be thinking about working with other departments within their company, right? So a PR team, a marketing team that may be hearing things about the company of a material nature, or that could be interesting from an activist perspective or from a retail investor perspective. But also keep in mind, I would argue that the future is about a social media friendly CEO. So when we talk about the CEOs, when we look at the John Ledgers of T-Mobile and the Peter Acetos from Tangerine, we have to be looking at these IROs that are out there, CEOs that are out there, and they're very comfortable with social media and what they're saying. So that's another component of this that IROs need to be aware of.
Geez, I even took a personal point away from that. So the survey took a look at a number of different technologies. What are some of the other tools that IROs are using beyond social media to interact with investors and analysts?
Yeah, this is really fun. So we found that most IROs are successfully utilizing traditional marketing elements, PowerPoint presentations, earnings calls, financial charting, headshots, logos. But we're definitely seeing a trend towards tweeting, blogging, a big trend in the last 2 quarters, infographics.
Okay.
So telling a story visually, which we're seeing more and more of, and it's really appealing and interesting. You can look at the Walmart earnings or GE earnings. And in this coming year, we'll probably see a lot more use of video, a tremendous amount of video, and multimedia in IR programming. The other component I would say to keep an eye out in the coming year, mobile, right? So mobile for an IRO is increasingly more important, and IROs should be aware of everything they're doing needs to be adaptive and responsive to a mobile environment. So your IR website. Canadian IROs should be speaking with their internal technology team if it's internally hosted, or with their external vendor to ensure that their IR site is responsive and adaptive to a mobile device or a tablet. And tools that we in the IR community are using, for example, investor targeting tools or whatever we may be using when we're at a road show and we're looking everything up on our devices, that all needs to be mobile friendly too. So it's a matter of social media and then coupled with emerging technology like video and mobile friendly.
That's great. I mean, obviously a fascinating space for investor relations to see how they're changing, how they communicate with the street, and some great opportunities for people to really engage with investors in a far more efficient way. Michael, thank you for sharing the highlights from your survey with us today, and we look forward to future surveys so that we can see how this evolves.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to doing this survey annually and then checking back in with the CIRI community and let you know kind of what's changing and where we're headed.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.